The President, please be seated. The court is now back in session. Now we would like to hand over to lead co-lawyers for the civil parties to put some questions to the witness.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will start and then my colleague will take over from me. Good afternoon to everybody and good afternoon to you, Mr. Witness, and thank you for answering our questions quite so patiently. I imagine it's not always easy for you to bring to mind the kinds of events we are talking about, so I'm grateful to you. What I want to do is just follow up on one or two things that have been said this morning and this afternoon, and then I will turn to the subject of the conditions in which you worked within the structures of the time. Can I pick up on what you said this morning on the period before 73, and you talked about your unit and the fact that there were defrocked monks who had been re-educated. There were no constraints placed upon this activity. Now, was it you who was doing this re-education?
Response. The defrocked monks were conscripted and when people were gathered from villages and communes and recruited, they were sent to my location. This location was not an educational center or education center. It was more like a temporary transit area. People would have to stay there for a short while before they could be transferred to other places. People who were there, I don't know whether they were there on their own volition or they were forced to move there, but some of them were defrocked monks.
Thank you. Now, a question about the warehouses you were in charge of. Yesterday, a witness said that in the countryside there were loudspeakers which disseminated party announcements about the struggle against the enemy and the encouragement to be given to the population. Did they have speakers of this kind in your warehouses or in your canteens or the places where you rested?
Response. At the cooperatives, there were loudspeakers where songs would be played, could be heard from the loudspeakers, and people at the cooperatives could hear the songs, and they could also hear comments on the radio broadcast regarding how to rebuild the country, so on and so forth, and this happened on a daily basis.
But in your warehouse, did you have speakers there or in the places where you went to relax?
Response, yes, they were there were loudspeakers installed permanently at the warehouses.
Je vous remercie, monsieur.
Thank you. On the same subject of the warehouses, did you have to keep reports, telegrams, documents, and mission reports? Were these stored in your warehouse in some place?
Response. All documents after the 7th of January, including the keys to the warehouses, were left behind at the warehouses, and we had to abandon them.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Let's move on to my second series of questions, and I want to pick up on what the prosecutor was saying earlier on about disappearances that took place in the two warehouses where you were working. You told us about arrests in the first warehouse, and you also talked about the same thing in the second. You gave us a certain amount of detail. But let me ask you one thing. You were in charge of each one of these warehouses, and in that position, when people came to arrest others, were you given documents, confessions, denunciations, or any other kind of document?
Response. Regarding the arrests, before I proceed to this, I would like to tell you about my roles. I was not the chairperson. I was assigned some tasks, including the management of the materials in the warehouses. However, when it comes to the documents relating to the arrests, I do not know, or I did never receive such documents. The arrests were made at my place, but I never knew what could have been the offenses that these people could have been accused of.
Donc,
So, despite your position of authority, you were nonetheless not given any explanation when these events occurred. Is that right?
Response. Yes, it is.
vous avez dit également.
This morning, or perhaps at the start of the afternoon, you told the co-prosecutor that during the study sessions, Nunchair advised you to undertake investigations to unmask traitors. That is how I understood it in the translation. Did he tell you that it was a duty to denounce traitors?
Response. During my testimony this morning, I said after the study sessions, we were asked to uncover the internal enemies. But the people who were the target for arrest were the people from the same village. And I just didn't know what happened to them that they had to be arrested. And some of them still alive, although some disappeared, but the arrests were made after 1976, and combatants in my unit were, some of whom were arrested. Altogether, 8 people had been arrested. That happens only at the Kampong Tekok warehouse alone. At Kilo number 6 warehouse, a few people were also arrested. These include porters. And again, I did not know why they had to be arrested, but I knew that phone calls were made in which some people had been asked to go to particular meetings, and after these meetings I did not see those people, and I never knew the offenses these people could have committed.
Je vous remercie, monsieur.
Thank you. Can I talk to you about your family? When you were questioned by the investigating judges in document E3469, and the French ERN is 00524390, English 00205113, and in Khmer 001720252, you said that your brother-in-law Sai was arrested and killed, and that your elder sister was executed in Tuol Sleng. When was your brother-in-law arrested and killed? Could you please tell us when that happened?
Response. Thank you for asking this. It is true that after having given interviews to people from the DC camp, I was invited to attend training on legal issues, and at the center I opened an album and saw a photo. Although there was no name attached to the photo, I asked people at the center to help find out who the person in the photo could have been, and they conducted the research for me, and we found another sibling of mine, a sister, and I also learned that these people were executed at S21, and finally I have obtained the exact date when these people were executed, but I just misplaced the note that I obtained from the DC camp.
Do you remember if it was before or after 1975 that this happened to your brother-in-law?
Response. He was executed not in 1955, rather 1975 or 1976, it was in 1977.
Thank you for that information. You told the investigating judge in document E3469 in French ERN 000 ending 88, English 002051 11 and Khmer 0017-2050 that poison was put in your food. And you also said that you saved some children whose food had been poisoned as well. Could you tell us exactly what this is about? I have very little time, so give us an expeditious answer, please.
Response. It is true that this happened. After several people had been arrested and new people had to take over from the other in the positions, anger was instigated, and at kilometer 6 people were removed, and when I was there I could see that people started to take revenge, and they did their best to show that they were venting, and later on research was conducted by the Khmer Rouge to find out who was behind this conduct, and these people who did the things were arrested. Normally, food would be delivered to the senior leaders, or rather to the leaders, and I was at the warehouse, had to also eat the food they delivered to us, and the children who had been very hungry for food had to eat this food without knowing that the food was laced with poison, and knowing that these children were poisoned, I had to pick some coconut, and I used the coconut juice to counteract the poison, and I was accused of picking the coconut, but later on the children were transferred to the hospital and they were saved. The President, Counsel, can you please be reminded that this witness is not a civil party, and that your question should be framed to those that are relevant to the scope of the proceedings, and make sure that the questions are relevant to our efforts in finding the truth.
Je n'ai plus qu'une question.
I only have one further question. May I respectfully point out that if we are not concerned about the state of mind of people responsible for structures, whatever the level, then we will lose a good part of the explanations of things. I will ask my last question. Sir, you told the investigating judge right at the very end of your interview that you were afraid and that you didn't know when you would be arrested. Can you confirm that today, please?
Response. I agree that it is true that I was afraid. At that time, if we were found out to be connected to the people who had previously been arrested, including our superiors, then we had reason to be fearful, because families or subordinates of the people who had been arrested would also be the subject for further arrests. And I have been very fearful, and I just realized that I had to hide my identity all along.
Je vous remercie beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Witness, for those answers. I think that you have contributed a great deal to the understanding of the truth in this case. Thank you very much.
Council Big Ong, good afternoon, Mr. President and Your Honors. I may wish to continue putting a few questions. And before that, let me say good afternoon to you, Mr. Witness. I am Big Ong, National Lead Co-Lawyer for the civil parties. I have a few questions for you, and I would like to seek some clarification for the purpose of finding the truth. Can you tell the chamber what you saw in 1975? Did you see people being evacuated from the city of Phnom Penh? Response. I saw people being evacuated from the city, but I did not know the plan to evacuate them. I just saw crowds of people on the streets leaving the city. Question. Can you tell the chamber where you saw them? Did you see them on streets in Phnom Penh or outside? Response. It was not in Phnom Penh that I saw these people. I saw them in the countrysides. I saw these evacuees who already been there in the countryside. Question. When you refer to countryside, which countrysides are you referring to? Response. Thank you for seeking this clarification. People, after being evacuated to the countryside, had to remain there, and I was still in Takao province. After people had been evacuated, my unit was demobilized, and we were asked to move to Phnom Penh. By the time we got to Phnom Penh, there was no people. People already left the city. Question. During the course of your journey to Phnom Penh, did you see people marching or walking in the opposite direction? Response. During the course of my journey, we first met at Sector 25 along the Tunle Basak River. We were at the Kampong Tekok warehouse to the east of Sa Thmai, and we did not see any evacuees. Question. When did you leave Takao for Phnom Penh? Response. I don't remember the exact date, but I know that I had to listen to the superiors who ordered us to moved to Phnom Penh. Question. Can you also tell us, please, how these evacuees were like? Did they suffer from the evacuation or not? Response. I may say that people would never be happy to leave their houses they had been living for a very long time already. I could see that some people were crying all along, and I could see vehicles that were broken on midway and had to be pushed or pulled by family members. Question. Can you say something about the age group of the people who were being evacuated? Did you see elderly people or children also among the evacuees? Response. People from all walks of life, the sick, people whose parents were very ill, who could not walk, people who had to ride, to take their cars, and then the car ran out of gasoline, and they had to push the cars, and they had to stop midway to exchange their clothes for some food. Question. Did the Khmer Rouge cadres care for the well-being of the new arrival or newly arrived people? Response. In simple terms, no, there was no such care. Question. When people got to the distant destinations, were they offered some food, or were they classified as the new people or the old people? Response. People were clearly classified. Those who had been moving from Phnom Penh to the countryside were regarded as the 17th of April people. They were treated differently. Nonetheless, these people were trying to move to their hometown or to the places where they had their relatives and loved ones there. But even though they could manage to reunite with their family members, those people appear to be very cautious when sharing food with the newcomers. And the people at the base, in particular the authority at the base, did not pay attention to the well-being of the new people. Question. You said people or the base people were afraid of helping the new people. What made you say this? What happened if these people were known to have assisted the new people? Response. The reason why the base people were afraid was that people could not even talk among ourselves at the work sites. We could not risk being seen talking to one another for even briefly, because we would then be arrested and executed. And the 17th of April people were placed in the area where they could not mingle with the base people. Question: can you please clarify on this? Why people were afraid of being accused of the 17th of April people? Who gave instruction to mistreat the 17th of April people? Response: it was part of the business of the commune chiefs or people in the area, but it is commonly known that the 17th of April people were classified and placed in different locations from apart from the base people, and treatment was also been different to these people. Question: I thank you very much, Mr. Soi, for explaining this to us. I would like to move back to the situation in Phnom Penh. When you were in Phnom Penh, did you see other people other than your colleagues? Response: upon arriving Phnom Penh, I could see that Phnom Penh was very quiet. There was no one except soldiers and the empty concrete buildings and houses. Some houses were unlocked, the doors were unlocked, some were locked. Question: thank you. I would like now to move to another point, but with that I wish to ask you this question. Can you tell the chamber about the connection between warehouses and other sections? Was there only one section such as warehouse, or was warehouse part of other sections?
Response: I do not know about that. I knew only about the warehouse where I was in charge, where I was working. I do not know about the warehouses of other units. Of course, other units had their own warehouses. I know only that the state warehouse was to store rice, salt, and other products from the factory. Question: regarding your superior, Rương, so who was above your superior? Response: regarding the structure of the leadership, I knew only Rương. Question: which leader used to visit the state warehouses? Response: the leaders who used to come to the warehouses have been mentioned already. they included Nuon Chia, Khieu Sampon, and others. Of course, they came, but I knew some of them only. Question. Thank you. Regarding Khieu Sampon and Nuon Chia, who used to come to the state warehouses, did they ever talk with you or other workers in the state warehouses? Response. When they came to the state warehouses, I did not meet them, but of course, they gave advice through other cadres, and I knew that he told us to take care of the equipment, to maintain the equipment, but I never met him in person. Question. You talk about the advice, the instructions through other people. So, what was the advice given through those people to you? Response. My superior who received the advice or instruction from those leaders would convey those instructions to us. But of course, when my superior conveyed the message to us, they did not mention the name of Khieu Sampon or Nuon Chia. My superior, Rương or Teng, only told us that in order to comply with the instruction from the top, we had to be careful, we had to take care of the equipment to make sure that we did not lose the equipment or the products. Question. I have another follow-up question regarding the material in the state warehouses. According to your knowledge, were those materials distributed to people? Response. As far as I know, the products from the factories had to be distributed to people every week, once every week. There were different kinds of products from the material, and I was in charge of transporting those materials from the factory into the state warehouses. Core 25 issued the documents to the workers at the state warehouses, and then we distribute the material out. But of course, I do not know for sure whether the material really reached the people. Question. I want you to clarify. You said you do not know whether the material really reached the people or not. So, the material were taken out of the state warehouses. Were they taken by your cadre, by the cadre, by you, directly to the cooperative or not? Respond. Regarding the distribution of the material, I did not distribute the material directly to the people at all. So, sometime I was at the state warehouses, and then I was in charge of inspecting the invoices, for example. And then I took the material onto the truck, and then I signed the document, and that's all. Question. You said that some of the material were distributed to the people. In other words, you are saying that some of the material are for the people. So, do you have any evidence or you have any document to prove that? Response. I do not know whether those materials were really distributed to the people, but of course, in principle, rice from the zone and sector were transported to the state warehouses, and then the state had to distribute the material to the zone and sector back. From my own notice, from my own observation, if the sector and the zone transported a lot of rice to the state warehouses, a lot of material will be distributed to those zone and sector as well. The President, Council, your time has run out. Council for Mr. Nuon Chea, you may put the question to the witness.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Witness, when you heard the tape of which you said Nuon Chea played that during the session, do you remember what was on the tape? Do you remember the confessions from Koi Thun? What did he say on that tape?
Response. After the tape was played, but of course I cannot remember all the contents. I can remember some main points only. For example, he attempted to kill Pol Pot, but that attempt was unsuccessful. Because of that failure, he made a confession. But of course, I can remember only that Koi Thun made the confession.
Do you remember whether the attempt involved food poisoning of Pol Pot? Was that said on that tape?
Response. I do not remember, I'm afraid. I just know that he attempted to kill Pol Pot, and I do not know how he did that. I just know that he attempted to kill Pol Pot. But from my own speculation or conclusion, he might use food poisoning that was more likely than the other method. The President, Judge Lavange, you may proceed.
Yes. Maître Copé, please clarify this matter. Do you intend to discuss the contents of Koi Thun's confessions, which is debatable evidence? The confessions obtained from S21 were obtained through torture, so I do not see the relevance of this line of questioning.
Judge Levin, I wasn't planning to ask further questions on the content. Just briefly refreshing his memory, because he has said to DC Chem about the content of the tape. But I'll move on because I don't have much time. Thank you. Mr. Witness, when you were listening to that tape, how many others were present listening to that same tape?
Response. During that study session, there were a lot of participants, but I do not know the exact number. People from different units attended that session. So when the participant came, they registered their names and then they attended the session. So I do not know the exact number of the participants.
I understand, but can you make an estimate? Were it a few hundred, a few thousand people?
Response. It is not up to 1,000 people, maybe hundreds of people.
Mr. Witness, do you remember, do you recall whether after hearing that tape there was a discussion among the listeners whether Koi Ton was considered rightfully a traitor or wrongfully a traitor?
Response. At that time, after the discussion among us, after we listened to the tape, of course, we could conclude that he was a traitor. So, at that time, we had to support, we had to use that word during that period.
In your statement to the OCIJ, E3469, UN number English 00205113, Khmer 00172052, and French 00524390, you have stated that the tape was played in the 1977 study session. Is that correct?
Response. In those study sessions, sometimes the tape was played, and sometimes the tape was not played. But of course, I am sure the tape was played in 1976 and 1977.
Now, in that same statement, on that very same page, with the same ERN numbers, you have stated to the OCIJ that during the session when this tape was being played, you also heard that Sao Pim was a traitor. Is that correct?
Response. Yes, that is correct.
Do you know when Sao Pim died?
Response. I do not know when he died. I just heard that Sao Pim was a traitor, but I do not know when he died.
Mr. Witness, there is evidence that Sao Pim killed himself on 3rd of June 1978. And I was wondering if you are certain that during the 1977 session, Nguyen Chia spoke about Sao Pim being a traitor. Are you sure that when he mentioned that he was a traitor, that was the same session during which you heard the recordings of the confessions of Khoi Thom? Could you please think well?
Response. Regarding the name of Sao Pim, I would like to clarify that I did not make the conclusion that he mentioned that name during that session, but I heard he mentioned the name of Khoi Thun during that session.
But are you now doubting whether you heard the name of Sao Pim being a traitor at that same session?
Response. During the study session and during the group discussion in that study session, we heard from the others about him.
Well, my question was whether you are certain that you heard Sao Pim being a traitor during the same sessions that you heard the tape being played about the confessions of Khoi Thom.
Response. I heard so when the tape was played, we knew that Khoi Thun was a traitor. Regarding Sao Pim, I knew about that only through the discussion. Later on, I knew that Sao Pim was a traitor of the CPK.
What do you mean when you say later on?
Response. Later on here, I refer to the discussion later on. So when something happened that could not be hidden from the public, during that period there was a slogan, you have to ignore things. Do not try to hear something. Please ignore something. So during that period we knew, but we did not dare to say anything.
Mr. Witness, let me try it in a different way. I put it to you that during the session that you heard the tape with confessions of Khoi Thom, there was nobody speaking about Sao Pim being a traitor. Is that correct? Is my assumption correct?
Response. I do not make the conclusion that Nguyen Chia mentioned his name, but the members of my group made the conclusion. And later on, Sao Pim disappeared. I did not hear Nguyen Chia saying that Sao Pim was a traitor. Nguyen Chia only mentioned that Khoi Thun was a traitor.
And when Nguyen Chia said that to you and the many hundreds who were there, was that something that was already generally known within the CPK, within the cadres, within the country?
Response. Regarding the State Warehouse Unit, anyone can know that Koi Thun was a traitor because the tape of his confession was played, but I do not know about the other units at all.
But would it be fair to say that when Nguyen Chia played that tape, everybody already knew that Koi Thun was considered a traitor?
Respond, yes, it is correct.
One last question on this subject, to be absolutely clear. Nguyen Chia never actually spoke to you directly in person about the need to uncover the enemies within, correct?
Yes, it is correct.
You have testified earlier that members who worked in the warehouse were sometimes called to meetings, and that before they were going to these meetings, they were afraid that they might disappear. You yourself have testified that you also went to meetings, but you obviously have not disappeared. Were you afraid when you went to meetings called by superiors?
Response. When cadres from the unit were called to attend a meeting regarding the technical work, I was not frightened at all. But when I talk about this meeting here regarding the disappearance, there was a phone call. And according to that phone call, this person or that person was invited to attend this meeting or that meeting. And what I knew was that I had to inform that person to attend that meeting, and then that person disappeared. And I do not know whether that person was arrested or not.
Three last questions on a different subject, Mr. Witness. Would it be fair to say that in the warehouse there were two sorts of rice, rice fragment and unhusked rice?
Response. Of course, there are two types of rice, but there are more things, more items. As I said, in Kampung Tekok warehouse, there were fabric, shoes, garment, mosquito nets, nails. There were many items, in fact. However, in the warehouse in kilometer number 6, there were rice, milled rice, rubber, cement.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. Do I understand your earlier testimony correctly, that the rice fragment, that was meant for export solely?
Response. I have said that I have responded to your question when you asked about the export of rice, and I said yes. But maybe I was mistaken. So right now I would like to clarify. Only milled rice was exported, and milled rice was transported from sector, from zone, and milled rice was stored in the warehouse, and then that unmilled rice was milled, and the milled rice was exported. So, if they need the amount of milled rice, they will specify the amount of the milled rice, and then unmilled rice will be sent to the miller. So, only milled rice was exported, not unmilled rice.
Last question, Mr. Witness. So to be clear, the unhusked rice that was sent to the zones, correct?
The President, Mr. Witness, please hold on. Co-prosecutor, you may proceed.
I do apologize, Mr. President. It's late in the day, but the question is a blatantly leading and, in fact, misleading question. Nothing in the witness's testimony today or in his sworn statements indicates what my learned friend just suggested. If he wants to ask about unhusked rice, he can ask that. But to put these words in the witness's mouth is just not fair.
Maybe I use the shortcut, considering the time. I will ask it more open, Mr. President. Do you know what happened with the unhusked rice?
Response. After unhusked rice was taken to the warehouse, so I look after that unhusked rice. That unhusked rice was not taken anywhere. But if they need milled rice, for example, that unhusked rice would be sent to the miller. But I'm sure that unhusked rice was not exported at all.
But was it sent to the zones?
Response. Many kinds of materials were sent to the zones. For example, cement and salt. And other products from the factories. So these products were distributed once every week. Regarding cement and salt, were distributed based on the need of those zones and sectors. At Kampong Tako warehouse, there were many kinds of items over there.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm mindful of the time, Mr. President, but the question was what happened to the unhusked rice? Was that sent to the zones? That was my question.
Response. Unhusked rice was not sent to the zone at all.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. Thank you, Mr. President.
The President. Thank you, counsels. Today's hearing now comes to a conclusion. The Chamber will adjourn now, and the next session will be resumed on Monday next week at 9 a.m. On Monday, we will be hearing TCCP 186 questions to be put by lead co-lawyers for the civil parties before the other parties to the proceedings. Please be informed that co-prosecutors and the lead co-lawyer for the civil parties will have half day for questioning time, and the defense counsels will have the remaining half day for the examination of this witness, a rather civil party. And TCW 752 will be a result witness for that day. Mr. Rosoy, your testimony is now complete. You are now excused. The Chamber is very grateful indeed to your attendance. Your testimony helps ascertain the truth. We would like to wish you all the best and safe trip home. Court officer is now directed to assist with the Vesu unit to ensure that Mr. Rusoi is returned home safe and sound. Security personnel are now instructed to bring Mr. Kyosompon and Nuon Jia to the detention facility and have them return to the courtroom again on Monday next week, the 29th of April 2013, before 9 a.m. Mr. Nuon Jia can be returned to the holding cell downstairs, where he can observe the proceedings from there through audiovisual link. The court is adjourned.